Good. Welcome. I would introduce my guest to you, but most of you know who it is. And I thought I'd begin by saying I remember quite distinctly the evening when I introduced him at the beginning of the first concert of his first SummerFest. It was 2 years ago, and then something happened. And I think I'll begin with that. I do want to talk about tonight. I do want to talk about your thoughts about the whole festival. What did you do during the period of COVID?
First of all, hi everyone. Here we are. It's so very exciting. I was uncharacteristically or unusually busy. My first order of business when everything dropped, and I was actually the morning that everything got canceled was I remember very well. It's also my birthday, March 12th. And on March 12th, I had a dress rehearsal with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra in the morning, and I was supposed to play two Ravel and Gershwin piano concertos on that program in the evening for 5 concerts. And at 6 o'clock, I was putting on my tux, and everything got canceled. Flew home, and then only a couple weeks later, it dawned on me, I finally have time to do what I always wanted to do. I had this dream to transcribe one of my favorite pieces of orchestra for piano, for solo piano, which is Rachmaninoff's symphonic dances. And so I taught myself how to use a notation program, and I spent several weeks doing that, which was the most blessed thing. I immersed myself in music that I loved from the moment that I woke up until I went to bed, and everything else disappeared. And then soon after, I started recording things at home. I recorded a couple of recitals at home. I taught myself also how to use video camera. I had professional video camera. I borrowed professional equipment. I was so annoyed by all this low quality stuff that was going on. It was great to begin with, but for me, it's all about the music, and all about the music, how it sounds, and I wanted it to sound good. So I recorded a few recitals, and they ended up kind of in syndication. And then in the summer, I traveled here. My husband and I and our dog got in the car, and we drove here from New York. And we stayed here. We wanted to stay here for just over a month because we had the virtual festival, an online festival from here, which was just such a joy to get together with musicians again and play, and such amazing musicians, and to do it here and in such great quality. It was really very meaningful experience for all of us. And then we just stayed because we looked at each other and said, should we drive back to New York? I don't, maybe we'll stay. So we stayed for 4 months here. And then by then, actually, I started playing quite a lot with orchestras, not with audiences, but I played with something like 14 orchestras over the following few months.
So a change for you now is you're starting to play in front of audiences.
Yes, that's a big change.
Yeah,
and it's hard to describe how wonderful that is. A friend of mine always says that he's an actor, and he says that for him, acting is like surfing. And I may have told you this before, because I just love this analogy. He said that acting is like surfing, because when great material meets an audience, there's friction, there's an energy there, and creates this wave. And he says, as an actor, all he wants to do is to surf it. Because you don't create the wave. As a musician, you don't. When a Beethoven string quartet meets an audience, there's always such tremendous energy. If you interfere with that too much, all you have to do is kind of just make sure you don't screw it up. You do the best you can, but you really want to. Without an audience, it's harder. You don't get that tension, that wave.
And you are not communicating either. So,
yeah, it's a harder thing. So it's amazing. I mean, just to see you all here is such a blessing. Yeah.
I want to ask you a little bit about at the start about how you put this season together. And the first thing I will note as program annotator is I wrote a lot of notes last summer for a festival that never happened. And I could use them again this summer.
You're welcome.
Because you included quite a lot of the 2020 festival that didn't happen. Can you talk a little bit about programming?
Absolutely. There are several reasons why we made the decision, and I made the decision to basically take the canceled festival of 2020 and do it this year. One of them is because I worked very hard on these programs, and I thought they were really good programs. So I didn't want to lose them. I didn't see a reason to. But also we, as an organization, I'm very proud to say, made a commitment to the musicians that were hurting a lot during, I mean, I was unusual in how busy I was. Most musicians did not play anything, did not earn any money. And the organization, I'm very proud to say, made a commitment to pay a portion of the fee for every musician that was supposed to come, and give them the opportunity to come back this year.
And you got almost all of them back.
Everybody almost every single. If they could come back, they could. Mm-hmm. They would. And some people couldn't come back for one reason or another. But we also got people that couldn't. People like Daniil Trifonov, who wasn't available last season, but is because we had a couple of years' notice for him at this point. We could get him. So we also had the opportunity. I had the opportunity to rethink some things and to adjust some things, and we found some new group that I'll talk about that I didn't know about at the time. So, but primarily everything most things are intact. And the theme for 2020 and for 2021 is self and sound.
Could you talk a little bit about that? Yeah.
Self and sound. I didn't realize at the time how important it was to sound like safe and sound. But self and sound, basically, throughout this festival, we're telling the story of the composers, how they wrote their own stories, their own life, their nationality, their heritage, the people that they loved, how they wrote that into their music. So how the self gets translated into sound.
Into sound, yeah. Can you talk, this is an impossible question, but can you talk a little bit about some of the concerts or themes, and that's one of them, that you're particularly looking forward to this summer?
Oh gosh, that is an impossible question.
Well,
I'm okay. I mean, it's impossible because every time I try and do that, my brain goes, what about that one? What about that one? Because there's so many things that I'm looking forward to. I have to say, tonight I'm very much looking forward to, because tonight was actually one of the concerts that changed a little bit.
Quite a lot, yeah.
Quite a lot, because it occurred to me that that we can't really do an opening night after the year and a half that we've had, or the 2 years that we had, without acknowledging the sense of joy that we all feel at being able to be back together and playing music again. So tonight's all about joy. Mm-hmm. I call it Ode to Joy. And
could you talk just a little bit about the programs on the program tonight? I mean, it's a really varied group of different kinds of music.
Yeah, the first half of the concert actually was. Most of the festival we're turning the focus on the composer's stories, but this concert we're actually turning the lens to the performers. Mm-hmm. So what brought the performers joy? either in this past year and a half or in their lives. So we have, and with it, we're also doing, we're playing pieces that are about joy and about the composer's joy. So, for example, we end with Mendelssohn Octet, which is the most joyful piece that ever existed. And it's about the miracle of youth. He was 16 when he wrote it, and it's hard to fathom. Yeah, a lot has been said about it, but not enough. But we have a collection of pieces that were chosen by some by me, some by the performers that are playing in the concert, and they're going to talk about why. During
so
the concert.
they'll talk too.
They'll talk about some of the performers that chose the pieces will talk about why. For example, there's a piece that Alisa Weilerstein chose because it was the first piece she played and recorded with her mother. And every time she plays it, it's even when she plays it with me, she remembers kind of the sense of playing with her family and the joy of it was in her first debut CD, and it was it means a lot to her. Some of those are not actually joyful pieces, but they symbolize joy. They're not happy pieces. Paul Huang, for example, chose a piece. And it's a wonderful story, and I'm sorry for ruining it for all of you, because he's going to say it from the stage. But I love this story. His grandmother did not particularly love music, but she believed in him so much. She bought him his first violin. She paid for his lessons. She sacrificed a lot for him to become a musician, even though she didn't like music that much. But she did love a particular song, Danny Boy. And there's a wonderful transcription by Chrysler of Danny Boy, called Londonderry Air, and he's going to play that because that was the piece he used to connect with his grandmother. And so each piece has a reason why it's there. Some of it is also one of the pieces I'm playing, which is a two-piano piece. It's a piece by Grieg, but it's actually Grieg's piano accompaniment to Mozart piano sonata. So he took a beautiful Mozart piano sonata that we all know, and he wrote a second piano part to play along with it. So it's so sacrilegious in some way.
But the incredible thing is, it works.
It works. It's so beautiful, and it's also. And he said at some point somebody asked him, why would you do this? And he said, Mozart is the epitome of joy, childlike joy, and irreverence. And he would be the first person to say, why is music held in such? It's not gospel. It's fun. It's supposed to be a joyful experience. And go ahead.
One of the things I like about that piece, and I had never heard it, I confess, is that it's for a student and teacher. Theoretically, the student just plays the Mozart C major piano sonata straight, and the second part decorates all around that. And it sounds like just an awful idea, but it really works.
It works, and it creates such a beautiful conversation between Grieg's language and Mozart's language. It's this dialogue between the classical and the romantic. So it's this feeling of also respect. He loved Mozart. Mozart was his favorite composer, and for him, the way to admire Mozart was to mess around with Mozart. It's not the way we think of classical music a little bit like. It's a museum piece. No, it's something to be. Get your hands dirty.
Grieg said, "I'm looking at Mozart through a warmly romantic lens."
He acknowledged it. He said, and he knew that some people, but he wrote it initially as an exercise, and then he loved him so much he wrote more and more and more, and he loved. So that's so forth. Now,
tomorrow night we'll talk about King's Return in some detail, but can you say just a bit, because they will appear tonight?
They will appear tonight. King's Return was one of those editions that were not in the 2020 festival, and it was actually Leah that sent me a link to our artistic director for the season, for the winter season, Leah Rosenthal, sent me a link to a video of these guys. They were just these 4 young black men who were singing on the stairwell of their church. And they were singing everything. I mean, the clip she sent me, they were singing chant, like almost a Gregorian chant, but translated by a modern composer. And they also sang spirituals, they sang popular songs. And I was floored by these guys. They were just such a beautiful a cappella group. So you'll hear that chant and another song from them today. And tomorrow is their big night because tomorrow is the first Synergy concert. The Synergy is, for those of you who have not been in 2019, Synergy is a series in which we take different art forms, classical music and another art form, and combine them with meaningful collaborations that enhance one another. So in this case, gospel and classical music. And again, we can do a several-hour talk on each one of these concerts, but this one I'm so excited about. When Dvořák moved to America for several years and became the director of the New York Conservatory. And he's one of the most celebrated, was and still is one of the most celebrated classical composers in history. And he became the director of the conservatory, and there was a student of his called Harry Burley, a young black man who was a composer and a singer, and he sang spirituals to Dvořák, and Dvořák was mesmerized. And he went to the press and said, why are American composers trying to sound like Brahms? When you have such amazing folk music at your disposal, why don't you base your music on these African Americans folk songs? He said also Native American, even though he didn't quite understand what that meant. But he himself then went to write his most famous piece, probably the most famous piece, which is the New World Symphony. And the slow movement of that, you probably recognize, actually. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous piece, but most people think he stole that from a spiritual, Going Home, the song Going Home. In fact, Going Home is based on Dvořák. So this concert is an exploration where we have King's Return, this amazing group, sing spirituals, and then we hear music that was inspired by those spirituals, by different composers, African American or not, Dvořák, and we hear them juxtaposed. So we go back and forth the entire evening.
I should tell the audience that tomorrow night Inon and I are going to talk, and we'll have them as our guests.
Yes.
So
yeah.
if you come tomorrow, you can.
I really, you don't want to miss this concert.
Yeah.
If you're here, come. But you don't want to miss any of them.
I'm going to ask you about a couple of specific things that you're doing. One of them is you have a guest composer, Gabriela Lena Frank,
yes,
who not only we're going to hear her music, but she's going to curate some concerts which she has assembled, I imagine, independent of your thinking about that. Can you talk a little bit about her, why you invited her, what an audience might expect?
Gabriela Lena Frank is somebody I've admired for a long time. She is one of the most prominent composers now. She's the what's it called, the season composer for Philadelphia Orchestra, but she's been
in residence.
In residence, thank you. She was described by Washington Post as one of the most important female composers in history. But she's a remarkable person. She was born with a very severe hearing impediment. Without her hearing aid, she's practically deaf. She's almost blind.
Oh gosh.
But she can see, she can hear enough, and she is, despite that, one of the most compelling composers In fact, when I fell in love with her music, I didn't know the story at all. I just loved the music. But she also is an amazing educator and person. She has this academy for composers up in Northern California, which she nurtures, and she has for many years. And when I invited her to curate 2 concerts in this space, she wanted to bring some of those, her favorite composers, and showcase them as well as her own music. So those 2 evenings, and because they're here, we can do it in a different way. We'll have a bar. There's a bar. People can sit in cocktail tables, have a drink, and it's it's an informal evening, and get to know these amazing composers. And it's only an hour each one of those, and so we're very, very excited to have her. We're also featuring a world premiere of one of her pieces earlier on in the festival and during the Synergy concert. She wrote a piece about the wildfires in California, where she is. And she collaborated with this choreographer and filmmaker. So the piece is going to be played at the same time as showing this film, live with the film. And it's devastating, but it's so beautiful. It's a whole evening. It's the second Synergy evening where most pieces are being played with films that were especially made for those pieces. Yeah. And then we end with Appalachian Spring. And it's which is it's about the American landscape and and that brings me to another kind of a subset of this festival. Which is mostly the Synergy series, but it's the American Perspective series, which means we're exploring all the self and sound, how sound expresses people, but from the American point of view. Why does something sound American? How, through different pieces, Appalachian Spring, Rhapsody in Blue,
Barbara.
Yeah, so all these things are departure points to create these evenings where we're exploring what is the American sound through film music, through
well, that was going to be my next question. There's a lot of film music in some of these concerts, too.
Yeah, there is one concert specifically about film composers, American film composers, because they informed the American sound so much. And if you hear a few days ago, Alex Ross, the critic for New Yorker, did a talk about this exact topic. A lot of us think of film music as being incidental, but there's this culture of incredible composers, including very famous composers that wrote for film. And
well, yeah, I mean, one of the nice things you're doing with that concert is not only is there all that film music, you end with Korngold.
Yes.
Which was a nice touch.
Yeah, Korngold became famous for his film music and won so many awards and was known, but he always was, at least for himself, but first and foremost, a serious composer. Yeah. And I wanted to challenge that idea. What is a serious composer? Yeah. Because Bernard Herrmann, we're playing the suite from Psycho. Which is fabulous music.
It is great music.
Fabulous music. Yeah. Can you imagine, and Alex was saying this before, can you imagine, if you've seen Psycho, can you imagine that scene in which she's driving in the rain without the music? No. There's nothing there. She's just driving. Yeah. But the entire tension, the entire story, everything is told through the music.
Well, and Hitchcock said that 30% of the success of that movie was the music.
That's, I think I would say...
Conservative.
That's conservative. That's a conservative estimate.
I also have to say, and you surprised me with this one, there is a suite of music from Star Wars for string quartet. I didn't see that one coming. But
I couldn't do a film music concert without including John Williams.
Yes.
He's a fabulous composer.
I'm saying this again and again. That quartet arrangement actually works much better than I thought it was going to.
Me too. That's why I included. We also have a world premiere on that concert by Aaron Zigman, who some of you know. He's a local. And he is a film composer. He wrote for The Notebook and all sorts of films, and a celebrated film composer. And he wrote a piece for me and Elisa that we're premiering in that concert.
Yeah, I want to tell just this story. Previn studied with Korngold, and Previn also wrote film music, and he talked about just that dichotomy between film music and serious music. And he said, music critics will forgive you for many things. They will forgive you for being an axe murderer, but they will not forgive you for having written film music. We're almost out of time, but I want to ask one other question. You touched on this before. A number of these programs are about love. And I want you to say just a word about the Janacek-Frank combination.
And I also want to mention another concert after that, just briefly, because I think it's one of my favorites. But the Janacek-Frank, so this is a concert titled Love Stories, I believe. And Janacek wrote, it was a very, very bizarre story. He had this woman that he was in love with that he wrote over, 700
letters.
700 love letters to. They were never together. There was never any indication she loved him back. She was married, I believe.
And had a daughter.
She married with a daughter. And yet he poured every ounce of himself into these love letters. And he wrote a string quartet based on those love letters. And he poured his entire essence into not only the letters, but into this quartet. So
it's a terrific piece.
It's a terrific piece. It's intimate letters. He called it intimate letters. And then it's coupled with another piece by Frank, is piano quintet that some of you know. It's wonderful, one of the kind of icons of classical repertoire, and really hard for the piano. And actually, I'm ending up playing it. It's advertised with different pianists, but he didn't get his visa. That's actually the only problem we had COVID-wise, was that we had problems getting some people from Europe. And he was just unfortunately, he'll be back, but I took over the piece, and I'm kind of thrilled because I love the piece, and I love it's one of the best collection of string players you'll ever see.
Yeah, I want to ask you a question. How long does it take you to learn a piece like that?
We'll see. No,
okay.
No, I've played it before. No, it depends. This one is at the time it took me a little while because it's quite tricky, but to relearn it is a much simpler than.
Yeah.
I hope. But that piece also was a suspect. It's such a passionate piece that his wife assumed when she heard it that he was having an affair.
And he may have been.
He may have
been.
Yeah. He may have been. In fact, the Saint-Saëns who played, I think Saint-Saëns played the premiere? Played the premiere on the piano, and he was also in love with the same woman. And he after playing it, he stormed off, left the music on the stand, which was not done in a piece that was dedicated to you. And he left it because he was so furious, because he also assumed that it was written for the same woman. Yeah. So
there's a lot going on in this kind of.
Okay, but one more. One more, which is because I really am so excited about this concert. This is called Grand Duos, and it's a concert at the end of the festival that features double concertos, but in different guises. Some of them more outrageous than others. The first one is Mozart, the most beautiful piece by Mozart, Mozart's Sinfonia Concertante, which is originally for violin and viola and orchestra. But somebody during Mozart's time, we don't know who, wrote a version for sextet, which is a wonderful, for string sextet. So we're doing that, and that will be beautiful. At the end of the concert, we're doing Chausson Concerto for piano, violin, and string quartet, which is, it's kind of, desert island for me. I love it. And with one of the great violinists of our time, James Ennis. playing the solo part, and an amazing quartet. In the middle, there's something that we've never done before, but I don't think anybody's ever done before. You'll notice on the cover of the brochure, and you'll notice when you go into the hall on the screens, there's some work by this artist called Daniel Rosen, and he creates these mechanical mirrors. And it's hard to explain when you see one, you're just floored. These mechanical mirrors from collection of different pieces. In this case, wood blocks, wood pieces. And this sculpture, when you go in front of it, mirrors you. They all switch locations, and you suddenly faced with your own reflection in wood. Mm-hmm. It's incredible, but it also makes an amazing sound. So
who is the composer?
Daniel Rosen. Oh, the composer is his wife, Tamar Muskal, amazing Israeli composer, and she wrote a concerto for the mirror as a percussion instrument with Steve Schick, the percussionist, playing it by moving. Oh God. And also playing percussion and as an ensemble. It's going to be probably the most. Even just the mirror is the most amazing, but that concert is not to be missed.
Okay, that is a good note to end on. Thank you very much. Welcome to all of you.
Welcome, everyone.